They were sleeping in their homes, dancing at a music festival, caring for their babies. No one was spared during a sneak attack by Hamas on Israel at the end of a major Jewish holiday. Hundreds killed, innocent children, tourists and the elderly taken prisoner. Tonight, Australian families are desperately trying to get out.
This is how we woke up, and we have two small children, two young daughters, 2.5 and 6.5 years old.
A murderous surprise attack.
I couldn't believe it was real. It didn't feel real, and it was only when talking to my parents who were in a bomb shelter.
Targeting the unsuspecting innocent, focused on kidnapping and killing.
The window's closing for people to be able to get out.
I'm Noah. This is my sister Tamar. We flew to Israel on our own on 3 flights a week and a half ago.
Gold Coast sisters on a trip of a lifetime to visit their grandparents.
We're just so scared that we'd get hit where we were in Aria.
Mum Maya, helpless on the other side of the world.
We just started a race to get them out of there. I couldn't breathe almost. I couldn't think, couldn't focus. The reason why we left Israel when they were very, very young is that, I guess. I didn't want to put them through this. I grew up in this.
Through determination and desperation, the girls got out, just on a flight to London.
Dad, how was last night?
It's a sketchy connection, but it's more than what many others have.
But the whole night, the windows were shaking. And I don't know whether it's bombs that are landing in Gaza or whether it's rockets that are landing in Israel. I've got no idea what it is.
Ian is in Sydney. His dad Alan and mum Marilyn just outside Tel Aviv, visiting Alan's brother.
And they arrived Thursday night, kind of had a day to recover, and then literally woke up the next night to bomb sirens. And talking to my parents, they didn't know what to do, so they didn't know where the closest bomb shelter was.
So you stand where there's 3 solid walls. So we stood in like a little enclave in the apartment, and the rockets were falling like you have no idea. So eventually my brother came to get us.
Alan and Marilyn finally found safety in a bunker, sharing it with Israeli Holocaust survivors.
They talk about how traumatic it was, but I think what has really stuck with them, particularly with my mother, is the stories of other people in the bomb shelters. So hearing from mothers who had no idea if their kids were okay down south.
It was a holiday that should have lasted 3 weeks. Now, a heartbreaking goodbye.
Our children want us to get out and we want to get out, but it's a very difficult thing because I'm leaving my brother here. So, it's a pretty tough decision to make, but we had to make it.
Hayley is Ian's cousin, a young mum to 2-month-old Aria.
I was able to get in my car and pack my 8-week born child up just after saying goodbye to my husband on the morning of his 30th birthday. He was called up to go to the army, as many other brothers, uncles, fathers have done. And it's a feeling that no one should ever have to experience.
Children, women, the elderly, taken hostage, hundreds killed.
I think that the thing that I'm just finding hardest is the deaths and of innocent people, literally people, hiding, cowering in their homes and having someone come in and take them away.
I grabbed one of our daughters literally from her crib, and my wife grabbed the other daughter and we ran into the shelter.
Arsen Ostrovsky fled to his apartment bunker on Saturday morning as the building shook from rocket attacks.
My 6.5-year-old daughter looks at me and says, "Daddy, why are they doing this? Why do they not like us?" And I have to explain that. I have to look my daughter in the eye and explain that to her. No father, no parent ought to do that.
The Bondi-born human rights lawyer now calls Tel Aviv home, a home that's now under attack.
It's roughly about, say, 40%, almost half the country have been under fire, under threat of rocket attacks. To put them in context, that is the equivalent of almost the entire population of Sydney.
And who knows how long the attacks or the war will last. The safest way out is by air. Like the Gold Coast sisters, Ian's parents have tickets to fly on Tuesday. 36 hours that will no doubt feel like a lifetime.
I'll talk to you later, mate.
Bye, Dad. I love you.
See ya.
Bye.
Scary for so many, isn't it? And the former ambassador to Israel, Dave Sharma, joins me now. Dave, you were in Israel during the major Gaza conflict of 2014. That one lasted 50 days. How does this one compare?
Look, this one already looks orders of magnitude worse. I mean, I remember being there with my children, having to evacuate to the bomb shelter, hearing the air raid sirens coming off, waking up early in the morning to the sound of rockets. But the sort of terror that Israeli citizens have experienced over the weekend is like nothing I experienced and like nothing I've ever seen. Militants rampaging through towns, brandishing weapons, shooting civilians on sight, raiding homes, abducting people, defiling bodies. I mean, it's just been horrifying and sickening.
I mean, this was so well organised and executed. I mean, Hamas got into Israeli territory. That is one of the most guarded borders. And they did it with bulldozers, utes and paragliders. And when we talk about intelligence, Israeli intelligence is one of the most sophisticated in the world. How did they miss it?
I don't know. It's a real failure. I mean, this is alongside the Yom Kippur War and almost 50 years ago this week where they missed that coming. But they didn't see this attack coming. They weren't in a high state of readiness. They weren't prepared. Their missile defence batteries were not fully operational and activated, but also the soldiers themselves of the Israeli Defence Forces. They took a very long time to reach the scene of this incursion. And Hamas had several hours to operate at will.
And in that time they were going door to door. It was the end of a Jewish holiday, so it was a time when people weren't using their phones, so they weren't able to warn each other. So often the knock at the door, they opened it not knowing what was coming. So beyond that intelligence failure, it sounds like it was a huge operational failure too.
It was. I mean, the Israelis should have detected the breaching of the fence and the border barrier. They should have detected paragliders coming in over the air. They should have been able to stand up their armed forces quicker. I mean, Hamas overran the military base of the Gaza division. This is the division of the army that is entrusted with the security of that region and the guarding of that border fence. The fact that that's been allowed to happen has been a real operational failure.
We saw too that a lot of people were taken hostage. On the other side, there's said to be more than 5,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails. What happens now? Is there an exchange, or is it too early to even have any idea what happens to those who were taken?
I think it's very difficult to know. It partly depends on what Hamas plans to do with these people. The reports I've seen suggest they have about 150 or perhaps more hostages, but these are, a couple of them are soldiers, but there's elderly people, there's an 86-year-old woman who needs a medication, there's young mothers, there's children, there's teenagers, the whole gamut. In the past, prisoners have been traded, but the last major exchange was for one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit, who was exchanged for about 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. There's not that many Palestinian prisoners in the jails to trade for 150 hostages. The ball is, I guess, in Hamas's court here, what they decide to do.
You've also got to wonder, with Gaza being so heavily bombed at the moment, are those hostages safe where they're being held?
Look, and we don't know. That's quite possible. I mean, they are of high value to Hamas at the moment. That doesn't mean that they have any care for their lives whatsoever. They'll discard them when the time suits them. But for now, Hamas will want to use them for political propaganda to put pressure on the Israeli government, and they will be able to do that. Hostages have a very high political currency in Israel, and ultimately they may well use them as human shields as well to protect their own people and installations.
Now, many people see this as an unprovoked attack. There have been no recent significant escalation, but there are others who argue that there has been decades of provocation, the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. You've got a far-right Israeli government that is against or won't even talk about a two-state solution. This feels like a moment that we can't come back from.
Well, certainly I don't think Israel will allow the status quo that existed previously to be restored. In the past, in military operations against Hamas, they've contented themselves with degrading their capabilities, doing some damage to infrastructure and setting them back by a few years. I think now Israel will see Hamas as an existential type threat which needs to be eliminated. They won't be able to tolerate its existence anymore. Now, that will have...
What does that look like, right? I mean, we know what that looks like and we're already starting to see it. The swift retaliation, the bombing of Gaza, and when you cut off electricity and food, we hear that hospitals there have no power. This is war, right? And who gets caught up? Innocent civilians on both sides.
And I would say, I mean, the civilians in Gaza are as much the victims of Hamas as Israeli civilians are. I mean, they've been living under this regime, this tyranny for 18 years now, a government that doesn't care about the welfare of its people, a government that is always provoking conflict with Israel, a government that uses all the money it gets to build military weapons and infrastructure and arsenals. So the best thing, if it could happen, would be for the Palestinian people in Gaza to be liberated from the rule of Hamas. Now, whether that will happen and how that will come about, I don't know.
I mean, there is also support for Hamas from those who feel they've been oppressed by the other side. But I mean, that then gets into a political debate that I think at this time doesn't feel like the right time. Would Hamas have launched this attack? You know, it would have known the catastrophic consequences if it didn't have the support of a big Middle East player behind it.
Well, I think there had been media reports that Iran not only encouraged and gave their blessing to this attack, but that it was actively involved in the planning and execution of it, along with units from Hezbollah, which is an Iranian militia in the south of Lebanon. I don't know if that's true. I don't think intelligence has confirmed it yet, but certainly the reports are credible and certainly it's plausible. It wouldn't make much sense for me for Hamas to initiate this sort of severe attack on its own with all the consequences that will undoubtedly follow without some sort of prompting or outside interest that it was seeking to achieve or advance.
Which raises the question, I mean, what is the goal here? Are they looking for a world war?
I think if Iran has been involved, and even if they haven't, I think the goal really here has been to eliminate the prospect of any broader peace in the Middle East, and particularly a peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, a diplomatic agreement, a recognition agreement. That has been being worked on by the US administration. It would build on the Trump administration's Abraham Accords, and it would transform the region, I think, entirely for the better. But it would leave actors like Iran out in the cold, and it would also undermine Palestinian nationalist groups who engage in terrorism and don't accept Israel's right to exist, groups like Hamas.
It just feels like the whole world is a little less safe today because of what we've seen over the past couple of days, and it's a horrible, stressful time for so many who are on the ground. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Ali.